Start thinking like a mastering engineer while you mix and arrange your music. Your songs are going to sound better, you're going to be able to mix them faster, and the music is going to translate from one system to the other. Meaning at the end of the day, when you're done in the studio, you're finished mixing, and you go check that mix in the car like we do, it's actually going to sound decent. A few years ago, I decided I want to dive deeper into the world of mastering, and I want to learn exactly what's happening in this magical mastering process. And so I started doing a ton of research. I started practicing every chance I could. I'd be like digging up old mixes that I've done and just practicing mastering techniques on them. And throughout this process, I learned a lot, and certain things became clearer to me that I could be paying attention to at other parts of the process. I needed to be thinking like a mastering engineer when I was recording and mixing and arranging and building the songs from the ground up, so that when I got to the mastering stage, I wasn't left with a pile of crap. Now there's two things that I want to talk about in this video to help you start thinking like a mastering engineer while you mix and build your music. And those two things are phase relationships and mono compatibility. So when we listen to music on, let's say, our headphones, usually we're listening in stereo, we've got a left and a right, but we aren't always listening in stereo everywhere we go. For instance, if you're at a restaurant and they've got like a Sonos system or something with like 10 speakers placed strategically throughout the establishment, they're usually playing in mono. Or maybe you're listening to a Bluetooth speaker at home or something, and your speaker is over here and you're standing over there. You're listening in mono, you're not really listening in stereo. Or maybe you're listening to that crappy new Drake song on your cell phone, and that's in mono as well. If you have a look behind me, you can see my very weird setup. It's a single speaker, it's in mono, and I've been producing and arranging music for the last little while in mono. And then I'm checking it on headphones in stereo to make sure that the stereo image checks out. But I want to tell you why this is working so well for me. First, let me tell you how I arrived at this situation. I just moved into this new place recently, and I'm not in a very massive room, so I just got these cute little KRK VXT 4-inch speakers, and they were secondhand, and they sounded pretty good for a little while until one of the speakers... Apparently KRK makes their speakers, or has made their speakers at some point, with this like black substance that people are referring online to as the black goop of death, or there's some other nicknames for it. Anyways, they use this substance to hold things together within the speaker, but after time it seems like this substance breaks down and becomes an electrical conductor, and they're using this substance on circuit boards. And so you can imagine when something melts onto the board and is an electrical conductor, the speaker zaps itself and basically kills itself. So I'm quite sure that's what's happened to my speaker, and so I've gotten rid of it, sadly, and I'm left with this, my mono setup. So what my process looks like right now is going through a song, building it from the ground up, and most of the time I'm listening in mono, making sure that all the sounds are working together. And once in a while I'll flip over to my headphones and check the stereo image, make sure that things are sounding wide and exciting while still sounding great in mono, because we listen in mono more than most people think we do. So what is mono compatibility? Well, let's think about our two speakers, and when we're mixing, the different decisions we make to push sound through either one. Firstly, we try to make things sound big and exciting in stereo. We take that whole stereo width, we pan sounds over here, some over here, our vocals in the middle usually, and we've got all this space to work with. Now, when we're in mono, it's right down the center. There is no space we're working with, so we need to make sure that our sounds aren't competing for the same space. We need to make sure everything is occupying its own frequency range and nothing is too stacked up, so that when we flip it into mono, it's not gonna sound muddy and crappy. We want it to sound clear and like there's separation between our tracks, and it's not just a big clusterfuck of all these sounds. Now let's take this a step further. You can mix your songs so that things aren't stacked on top of each other and sounding muddy and crappy, but you also need to make sure that everything is in phase. When you sum two channels, your stereo image, when you sum them to mono, you need to make sure that you haven't lost any sounds. And I'll give you an example of this. Maybe you have a guitar part and you wanted to like double it, or maybe you just use some kind of stereo enhancing plugin to make it sound wider. Now you've got two different sounds coming from the left and the right. Some stereo enhancing plugins will kind of duplicate your sound. So you've got your mono guitar track or whatever, and then you run it through the stereo enhancer and it creates 2 tracks and puts one on the left and one on the right. And it creates contrast between these 2 sounds between the sides to make it sound wider and bigger. It could even be an identical part played twice, like if you doubled up your guitar. You need to make sure when you flip these big stereo sounds to mono that they have not canceled themselves out due to the phase relationship. So let's explain that real quick. When a speaker plays sound, the cone is pushing either out or in, and it goes back and forth and it vibrates and it makes sound. So let's think back to our guitar part that's panned hard left and hard right, 2 different takes. Perhaps on the, say the downbeat, this guitar on this side, the phase is pushing outwards, where on this side, the phase is pulling inwards. And then when you flip that to mono, this side is still trying to push out while this side is pulling in. And then we get phase cancellation. The speaker cone literally stays still. So the sound has just canceled itself out due to the phase relationship between the left and the right sides. In some situations, you can get away with just flipping the phase switch so that your tracks are now playing in phase and they're both pushing outwards and pulling inwards at the same time. So that when you stack them, you still get that nice big sound. Okay, so now we know a little bit about phase relationships, and I'm gonna quickly run you through how I'm making music right now with this setup back here. Let's start from the beginning, and I am producing a track and I'm finding sounds, I'm maybe recording some things, and I'm building out my arrangement. And most of the time, I'm just listening through this mono speaker and I'm making sure that everything is playing well together. All the sounds that I've found aren't stacked on top of each other and muddying everything up and sounding clear. Everything has separation. And once in a while, I flip over to my headphones, throw them on, and I listen to my track in stereo. And so throughout the entire production process, I'm just going back and forth between my speakers and my headphones. While I'm listening through the speakers, I'm making sure that there is nice separation between the tracks, everything's sounding clear, playing well together. No sounds are being canceled out due to phase relationships when everything's summed to mono. And then periodically I jump over to my headphones, throw those on, check the stereo imaging, making sure that things are sounding somewhat wide. I mean, I'm not mixing at this point, I'm just creating the arrangement and the production overall. So I'm making sure that things are sounding pretty wide and exciting. I'm making use of my stereo field, and I want things to still sound nice and punchy while it's in stereo. I have benefited hugely from listening in mono. I've known about this for a long time, and I've always checked mono to make sure that I didn't have phase cancellation or any other weird problems. But since I've started mainly producing in mono and checking stereo once in a while, I feel like my mixes have gotten way better. My productions are sounding fuller, richer, and when I get to that mastering stage, it's just much easier and I'm getting better results all across the board. So once I've finished my production here and everything sounds nice and clear and separated while listening in mono, and then I throw my headphones on and it sounds wide and exciting and full as well, nice and punchy still, then I'm ready to mix it. You need to constantly check the mono compatibility, basically at every step, to make sure that things aren't being canceled out, things sound nice and clear and rich and full, and all of this shit that I've just said 100 times in this video. I cannot stress that enough. So we've finished our mix, it's sounding great, and we're ready to master it. If we've done a great job in the mixing phase, everything's sounding good in mono and in stereo, we've got great phase relationships, everyone's happy on the left, right, center, sides, mid, everywhere. Mastering could be as simple as slapping a limiter on that track and calling it a day. Okay, that's it. I hope you got something out of this. I hope you learned some things. I hope you're gonna pay attention to your mono compatibility in the future and make sure that your phase relationships are all good ones. Good, healthy, positive phase relationships. Thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe button, hit the dingy bell, get notified. I'll see you next time.